Good afternoon, Kansas school counselors. Thank you for joining us over the lunch. I hope that the information that we provide today will finally help with some of that anxiety that you might be experiencing. I know that as a mother of a senior, there's so much that I want to know too. So I'm really excited to learn from our guests today. We have Tara Labar and Michelle Ariano from KBOR, Kansas Board of Regents. I'll let them introduce themselves here in a few minutes. But as we talk about through these the slides that they're going to provide, we do ask that you keep your session on mute, and then later, if you want to ask questions, you can unmute, or you're welcome to put things in the chat. Okay, so Michelle, would you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Ariano. I'm the Director of Student Financial Assistance at the Kansas Board of Regents. And prior to coming to KBOR, I was at the University of Kansas for a little over 20 years, working in financial aid advising as well as scholarship advising too. So it's good to see y'all here, and thanks for coming.
Tara?
Hi, and I'm Tara Labar. I am Associate Director for Academic Affairs with the Kansas Board of Regents. I'm also the State Coordinator for the Apply Kansas campaign. Prior to joining KBOR in August of 2020, I worked as a high school counselor. So my background is very much in counseling, and I enjoy working as a post-secondary resource from the Kansas Board of Regents office to our high schools and counselors across the state. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Yay, welcome. We're so glad to have you both. So I also want to introduce our other school counselor leader coordinators that might be on here. I think I saw Mal Powell on there. Hannah might pop in for a little bit, and Nick might as well. But my name is Melanie Scott. I am the secondary level representative. So again, we're just so thankful to have Tara and Michelle here with us today. So we're going to get started here in a few minutes. They are going to share a wealth of resources, the latest changes, some counselor sessions that recorded sessions that you can access, a toolkit website, some information on scholarships, and then again at the end, we'd love to give you some Q&A time if they haven't answered your questions. They did a really good job of going through the questions that you asked on the registration, so hopefully you'll see answers throughout their presentation. We also want to share that on the slide deck is a link to our upcoming school counselor PD for the rest of the semester. We have some amazing coffee with counselor opportunities with rural counselors and just for fun in the holiday seasons. I know that we have some suicide prevention toolkit trainings, a really quick overview that we changed the date to the end of November to 11/28 over the lunch hour. And then of course, some in-person offered throughout the state of Kansas. So please join us for those and ask us if you have questions. And then at the end, there will be a quick evaluation that we ask that you please provide your feedback. It's always valuable to us. We want to know how we're doing, and if there's any additional questions that we didn't answer, then we definitely want to get back with you. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, and Tara and Michelle, take it from here.
Great, we'll get that switched over. The first thing I'm going to put in the chat for you is a link to a Google Doc that has all of the links in one place to the resources that we're going to talk about today. And then also, once we get rolling here, we will be sharing this recording and the presentation, and again, these resources on our KBOR website. And I'll put that in the chat here in a minute, but you'll find that recording if you know of somebody who wasn't able to attend today. That'll be accessed there hopefully by the end of the week, if I can get up and going. So, all right. So with that being said, we are going to kick off just sharing some information about the FAFSA changes that are coming for students entering in the fall of 24-25 school year. Again, you heard a little bit about each of us. Michelle has just recently joined the KBOR team in September this year, and she's been such a great addition. And to be honest with you, I'm like you guys, I'm a school counselor, and I know this much about the FAFSA. I know enough to be dangerous. I know enough to hopefully get my students pointed in the right direction. And Michelle knows the FAFSA a lot better than that. So you're going to get a lot of great information. She's my FAFSA expert in the KBOR office, and I'm really glad to have her. And so I'm glad that she's a part of this. So if you came to my Apply Kansas trainings, you heard a little bit about this, and essentially the FAFSA is changing, and you know, I know we've heard all of that already, but why? And so just really quickly, the FAFSA Simplification Act actually came out in August of 2022 with the purpose of making the FAFSA more accessible, streamlining the FAFSA, making it easier for folks to do. I don't think anyone would call the FAFSA easy, right? So the three goals that came out of that legislation, and this is federal legislation, was to expand eligibility for federal financial aid. So more students would get some type of federal aid. And I think we'll see that hopefully in the number of Pell eligible students through this new form. Number two, they wanted to reduce the barriers. So again, making it easier, but also making it easier for students to complete the FAFSA, access these funds. And then three, to create a better user experience for the FAFSA form, which, well, I don't know, you know, that could be useful for all of us. How about that? We'll say that. So with that being said, you know, what is this actually going to look like? I mean, I think we'll see a simplified form, meaning we'll have reduced number of questions. That's good. And I also think we'll see better skip logic too, meaning if you answer the question and the next question doesn't apply to you, you'll skip those. I think that's been a part of the FAFSA up till now, but I think we'll see an improvement in that as well. Also, this is going to be a role-based form, meaning that the intention is the students will complete the FAFSA first, and then they will enter their parents. Parents are now going to be called contributors, but they're going to enter the information for their parents in email. And when they enter that and they submit their part of the FAFSA, then an invitation goes to those parents or those contributors following the student initiating the FAFSA. So, and we know the FAFSA, there's exceptions and loopholes to all of these rules, but this is kind of the intention behind the Better FAFSA, is that the student would initiate that first, and then it will roll to the contributor or the parent. Next, tax information is electronically going to be transferred from the IRS to the FAFSA for all contributors. This, I think, has been happening already, but it's going to be automatic, or it's going to be a part, an increased part of this new Better FAFSA form. And then the form will open in December sometime. My money's on late December. We do not have a specific date from Federal Student Aid Office yet. And so, but by law, they have to open it before January 1st. So it has to open in December of 2023. That's really what we're talking about. I would say functionally for your purposes, the FAFSA is not necessarily going to be accessible to students until January, likely. I mean, functionally, this is going to be a January thing. Once we add the winter breaks and everything into this, I really don't think your students will have access until January. Remember, a couple things to keep in mind. The experts in our institutions the experts in this are institutions' financial aid offices. They are still there to help you and your families navigate concerns, changes, exceptions, all of it. They're there, they're ready to answer your questions, that type of thing. And for most students, remember too, this new FAFSA, this Better FAFSA is just new. It's new to them. They've never done the FAFSA. So you don't really have to worry about explaining the changes to your families and your students and all that stuff. I think it's helpful for us to know, and why is it opening now, and those types of things, what to expect. But I don't think you need to worry about messaging this to your students and families, because many of them will just be doing it for the first time. It's all new to them. So they don't know the difference between last year's FAFSA and this year's FAFSA. So with that being said, we have to wait for the FAFSA, but the FSA ID is something that students can do now. And I'm going to turn this over to Michelle to talk a little bit about, there we go, to talk about that FSA ID and tell you a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Tara. So like Tara said, everybody is going to be some form, will have to go into the FAFSA at some form, right? So everyone being students and their contributors. So the perfect thing that they can do now while they're waiting for that FAFSA to be open is to set up that FSA ID. And it's really important that they try to get that process done right about now, December. Please encourage them to start that really, really quickly. The signature page is going away so that FSAID serves as their official submission. They're sending it through. That's their electronic signature per se. So we did see a lot of questions come out about individuals who don't have a social security number. So students who don't have a social security number are not eligible for the FAFSA, right? So students who have a social security number or who are eligible to file a FAFSA, meaning they're permanent residents, need to do so through the FAFSA and get an FSA ID. I'll go over in a little bit later how the process is for parents that don't have a social security number. There's a whole new process on how that is being done. And I've got some screenshots to actually show you what that will look like for a parent and how a parent is recognized as the real submitter of the FAFSA once they do that, if they don't have a social security number. So the ability, though, for a person who does not have a social security number to get an FSA ID will not happen until the FAFSA actually loads. So the only individuals who can get an FSA ID now are students and parents that have a social security number.
Michelle, there was a question in the chat that said, what about students that already have a phone number or FSA ID connected?
Yes, they should
that
log in again. So try to log in now, make sure that that's still active and ready to go. So yes, their current FSA ID should work, but they need to log in and make sure that that's ready and everything is all set. And then all the information that's needed for the FSA ID is current and accurate. So making sure that the email address is correct, the contact information, the address, all of that is correct.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm actually the one that put that. So I have had 2 seniors and they are the first ones going to college. And when they've started their FSA ID, it says that there is an account associated with their phone number. And there's not, obviously. The only thing I'm in a group on Facebook for PSAT because that was a disaster this year. And I asked that question of those counselors and they said maybe that phone number has been somebody else's at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what we do about that.
So there is contact information for federal student aid. I would highly suggest them calling to get that squared away as soon as possible. It may take some time to get that sorted, but yes, they do need to have a cell phone number as well as an email address. So making sure that that's all cleared ahead of time would be really, really good. So have them contact federal student aid. There is a contact information like link and phone number within the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Michelle, is there anything else we need to talk about the account creation?
Yeah, so it's pretty streamlined.
There we go.
So for an individual to actually set up an account for the first time, this is what they're going to need to do. And then of course, enter in for the student, the social security number to get that all squared away. So the social security number will be verified through the Social Security Administration on the back end. So if for some reason a student does enter in the wrong student social security number, which does happen quite a bit, my son did that once a few years ago. So you do have to call and get that fixed. So definitely always call federal student aid or get a hold of them if there's any issue with any of the information within there. Okay, so the process of getting an account without a social security number. So there will be a new icon on the account creation piece where it's a checkbox. So if the parent who's filling this out does not have a social security number, they'll go to that. They'll fill the top pieces off, they'll check that button, and it will let them move forward. So in the past, it didn't, it kind of froze. And the individual had to do like a paper application. So, or they had to put like X's or zeros. So for here, checkbox and then continue. The individual will have to answer a series of knowledge-based identity questions. So this system is linked with credit bureaus and it's pulling this information already. based on just this generic information that a person puts in there. So these questions that are being answered, if they're answered correctly, then the individual will move through the process to create an FSN or an FSA ID. If for any reason the individual answers the question incorrectly, they cannot go back in the system. It actually will flag them and tell them that they have to contact FSAC, so the FSAIC number, so this number, and someone in Federal Student Aid will help them clarify all of that. There'll be a process of identifying the individual, a verification process, and they'll have to provide proper documentation. So this is a piece that will take some time. So for an individual who doesn't have a social security number, they want to start this process as soon as that FAFSA opens up, because it will take some time to get verification in case they answer those questions incorrectly.
There you go.
So for an individual who doesn't have a social security number, they should have these things on hand just in case they do not answer those questions correctly. So definitely proof of identity, utility bills, things like that. So making sure that this is what they have on hand, just in case they don't complete those questions correctly.
Okay.
Okay. So we did get the question of, well, what documents are needed for the FAFSA? So even though the tax return information is going to be pulled through the system directly from the IRS, it's very important to have that information on hand, because there are other questions that are going to be asked on the FAFSA that may require them looking over their taxes. So that would be any pensions, any scholarships or grants that they may have received while in high school that they're claiming on their taxes, things like that. So having their taxes on hand is super important. For parents, it's really important for them to have information about child support received, because they'll have to enter in that information as well, if that's the case for them, as well as bank account information, what kind of cash savings or checking accounts are in that specific day that they're filing the FAFSA. During verification processes, perhaps they may need this. So it's super important for them to do like screenshots of what's in their bank right now. What they shouldn't include in their checking account amounts or cash savings account amounts, or if the student does already have any scholarships or aids sitting in their accounts. And then we did have some questions about investments, businesses, and farms. So for this, it's super important for individuals to really kind of know this information ahead of time. So net worth is the value of investments minus any debts owed against them. So this is a big thing for farms, for any agricultural operations, right? So debts owed against them. So value minus debts. So this is a lot of information that's being inputted, but for some individuals, this will be a quick process. If they don't have any pensions or IRAs, if they don't have any investments or businesses or farms or things like that, they should be able to breeze through this application for the FAFSA. The entire application will take about an hour if they have all that information ready to go.
I got a question. So it says, another webinar I heard now, small businesses under 100 employees will need to report value. Define value. Is it net worth, or do you know any of those specifics?
So that value is the same. It's, basically any debts owed against them. So it's value minus debts. And there was a question about tax preparers.
Yes.
Like, you have a tax preparer here, right? If a parent has any questions on how that's all going to work, then it helps, to have someone who really understands their taxes to be able to fill this out too. So I have had some individuals do their FAFSAs with their tax preparers because they needed just that extra person to help them through that. And that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that if they don't feel completely comfortable with answering these types of questions.
And then another question was, what tax return is this the year? We're doing 2022 taxes for this new FAFSA? Is that correct?
Right. It'll be prior year. So it should be the 22.
Is that That's not right,
Is that
because
right?
23 was 21. This is
Right.
before FAFSA, so it's
Mhm.
22
Yes,
times.
it's 22. Yep.
Yes. Okay. I was trying to do the math. Okay, great. All right. One of the things that we have, I don't know, and I put a link to this too. FAFSA has created some really neat videos and graphics, and there's actually one that students will see when they start the FAFSA even. I'm going to play this for you, I hope. If it, oh wait, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm going to play this for you. And we can watch this for a couple minutes, but in the resources that I shared you a link with the Student Financial Aid YouTube channel. And I'll be honest with you, the new 24 videos are still coming out. Like they made a new one that I linked for the FSA ID, and that just came out in the last week. So the new 24 videos are coming slowly, so keep checking back, but these are great resources for you to use with your students. So here we go. We'll see if this works.
Uplift us. Making them a reality starts with an education. Don't think you can afford it? There is help. You can apply for grants, loans, work study funds, and certain scholarships by filling out the free application for Federal Student Aid, or FAFSA form. October 1st is the date the application becomes available for the following school year. You should fill it out ASAP to meet your state, school, and federal deadlines. More on that in a moment. To be eligible for Federal Student Aid, you must be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, such as a U.S. national or permanent resident, have a valid Social Security number, have a high school diploma or equivalent, and be enrolled or accepted as a student in an eligible degree or certificate program. Check out studentaid.gov/eligibility for more criteria and details. There are a few things you need to have on hand when filling out your FAFSA form. You'll need your Social Security number, alien registration number if you're not a U.S. citizen, federal income tax returns, W-2s, and other records of money earned, bank statements and investment records, if applicable, records of untaxed income, if applicable, and FSA ID, account username and password to sign electronically. If you're a dependent student, your parents will need most of this information too. Finally, let's talk deadlines. Besides federal government aid, you may also be eligible for aid from your state and school. And to be considered for that aid, you have to fill out the FAFSA form in time. Visit the FAFSA deadline section at studentaid.gov/FAFSA. Make sure to mark your calendar for the cutoff date for your state and school. Better yet, just remember to apply ASAP after October 1st. To make sure you don't miss out on any aid you're eligible to receive, you must fill out your FAFSA form each year you plan to attend school. Start turning your dream into a reality today at FAFSA.gov.
Okay, so obviously that was last year's introductory video. It still works a bit, and next year we'll be going back to that. October 1st opening that we've had all along. It's just this year with the new FAFSA, it's just not quite ready yet. So, all right, so that's an example of those small videos that you can use. The new ones have a college counselor person that does some talking. And like I said, I linked some of those for you. I think they're really good resources for your students to learn more about the FAFSA. There's an introductory one, and there's also a why do I need a FSA ID video that's brand new that I think could be useful, especially if you're wanting to do a FSA ID workshop with your students now. So now Michelle will kind of show you a couple of the changes, and I'm going to put a link while she's talking to a really cool simplification page that we used in the Apply Kansas trainings that kind of show, again, parents are now called contributors, and some of the changes from the old to the new, so you can see some of those things.
So we talked about this before, but students are required to provide consent and approval. And that is all so that the IRS can pull that information into the FAFSA. So that consent is needed. If a student decides not to provide consent, then they are going to have to enter in all of their tax information directly, which does not sound like any fun. And nobody wants to do that. So we're encouraging everyone to please provide consent and for them to move through the application online completely. So the contributors, like Tara said, that's the parents, right? But it's also it could also be spouses, parents, new spouse, a whole lots of other things now. So the contributors are not just like one person, it could be multiple. So students do have to provide that information and ask for, if they're a dependent student, they do have to ask for that, the contributor to provide that information on their FAFSA. Okay. Next one. So we got a question about this in dependency status. So if a student is a dependent, but they're not able to provide any information about that parent, or the parent maybe does not want to provide their tax information for the FAFSA. Working in higher ed, this happens quite a bit, even for continuing students where their parents are unwilling to file the FAFSA for them. That doesn't mean that the student just can't get financial aid. It just means that the student will only get unsubsidized loans if they're dependents and their parents just say, no, we're not going to do that. So there are, this kind of stops that application process for having contributors if the person says yes on this question, but it is the kind of second step of the application for the FAFSA.
Go.
Okay. So these are the circumstances that the financial aid office would accept if there are any unusual circumstances for a student to say, yes to that question. So it doesn't automatically make a student an independent student, right? So, but a university could, or a school could make a student independent if they have these unusual circumstances. I'm not going to read them out to you, but if any of these apply, there is a possibility the student could be switched to an independent student in the FAFSA.
And you would do that with the institution, correct?
That's correct. The financial aid office will be requiring this documentation once they see that that student had marked yes on that question.
Okay, so you could get the student in contact with the financial aid officer. That would be a way that counselors could help.
Yes, that's correct. Yep. So these are the biggest changes. So for dependency status, if a student's parents are not married to each other, so right, there's always this question, well, who provides this information on the FAFSA? Is it mom? Is it dad? Is it, who is it? So if they do not live together, the student must provide parent information of the parent that provides more financial support than the other parent. So that doesn't always mean it's the parent that the student is living with, right? It could be the other parent who's giving all that money for child support, perhaps, right? So if they say, well, both of my parents provide an exact amount of financial support, or if the parents do not support the student financially, they say, no, I kind of do this on my own. The student must provide information on the parent with the greater amount of assets on the FAFSA. So the person or the parent that makes the most money, who has the most money coming in. Okay. If the parents are divorced or no longer together, if one of those parents remarries and that's the parent that needs to provide the information on the FAFSA, that parent's new spouse will also be a contributor. So they will also need to have an FSA ID to sign in and enter in that information. So this is all spelled out in the processes of the FAFSA, and hopefully the student, if there's this complexity, will kind of understand what they need. So definitely help navigate the student through that process.
Michelle, we have a question in the chat. Does it matter who claims them on their taxes?
No, it doesn't at all. It all has to deal with financial support. So not taxes, but full-on financial support. Who's giving the most money to help this child?
And maybe you guys have seen this too. There's I don't know what like a demo question on the federal student aid website where you can go through an actual demo of the FAFSA, some of the FAFSA questions. And I think you can see the questions that the student will answer regarding with who they're living with and how it looks. Does that sound familiar, Michelle?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, because I was going to say, I think I've seen that, which would be kind of a cool way if you wanted to access that, to look and see, because there are questions on the FAFSA. Again, remember, this starts with the student before it goes to the contributors. So the student will answer, who do you live with? Or, how, like kind of what that family dynamic looks like to help them know whose information they need to put in, or whose contact information, who's going to be participating.
Correct. And what I don't have on here, but it's the case and has been, if a student is living with both parents who are married, or the student has both parents in the household, both parents should get an FSA ID, because they will have to go into the system and kind of sign off on that application. So like for myself, my son, I'm married, we both have an FSA ID. We both have to go in there and actually do that.
Okay.
Okay. Next one. So this is what it looks like. So once a student enters in their information or the contributors' information, through that process, it tells them, okay, these are who you put down there. You can send an invite. So they can always go back to this page too and resend that information. But this is what it is. So there is a little bit of a hitch, and we've got some questions from higher ed administrators about this as well. Like, how long does a parent have to complete this process? So we encourage parents, please, to do it as soon as possible, to get on there and complete it all. But they do have, it says 45 days, right? So if nothing happens after 45 days, they say that the forms are going to be deleted. We don't know, administrators don't really know what that looks like yet. Or, do they have to recreate another account, fill out another FAFSA? We don't know that yet. So hopefully though, it doesn't get to that point. But if it does, there would just be a call to federal student aid, right? And say, okay, parents haven't done it yet, but it's been over 45 days. Do I need to go back in there and add them again? Maybe they disappeared. It's just kind of part of that process. We'll have to go through that when we get to it. But again, that calling federal student aid would be the way to go for that. Okay. And this is what the email or the invitation when the parent gets. So the parent does have to accept it, and then go through that process with their FSID and fill out all those forms.
Next, kind of talking about institutional timelines, because I know this is a question that's come up too. A couple of things to remember. The FAFSA is released at the same time as for everyone. Students, colleges, families. Colleges may get a tiny peak, but you have to remember that, if a student, when it opens, like say it opens on December 31st, and there was a student that filled out the FAFSA that day, their information still has to go to the institutions that they selected. But again, the institutions haven't seen this either, and they haven't paired up their systems to match the new fields from the new FAFSA to be able to accept that information from your student's FAFSA. So even if they filled it out on the very first day it was open, our institutions couldn't even process it because they don't have a way to bring that information in yet either, because they haven't seen the FAFSAs. No, everybody gets it at the same time. So colleges will have to set up their systems to process the information from the new FAFSA. They're waiting, they're ready, they want to do this, but it's still going to take a little bit of time. Okay, so they will also be figuring out the new exceptions, the new rules, the new everything alongside with you. So they may not have the answer right away because they're going to be kind of figuring out these glitches as we go. Once this FAFSA is released, and again, I'm just going to say functionally January, they're going to be making plans and they will adjust their FAFSA deadlines accordingly. So it will all be crunched for everybody. We're all kind of scrambling together. And just know that patience and grace is the name of the game this year. Remind your families of that too. Our institutions are still going to be the experts. They're still going to host FAFSA events. Financial aid packages will be just released late. They will be released, but they will be late. Everything will be crunched between January and April. It'll just be crunched. What we're used to doing between October and April will be smashed between January and April. And the institutions will be working as fast as they can. So, you know, just remember yourself, keep working with it. If you get an answer that feels weird, call back and you might get a different answer. Again, everybody's adjusting all at the same time. So be patient, be kind, help your families do the same. Because it's the upside down world, right? It's all strange this year for everyone. Also, the CASFA trainings. This is the Kansas Association for Student Financial Aid Administrators. They're professional organizations. Every year they do fantastic counselor trainings, and this year is probably more important than ever. So this is their schedule for this year. I've put their counseling training link on the Google Doc that I shared with you earlier. You can hear the recordings of the ones they've already done, and you can also register for their upcoming sessions. They'll have one in January where they'll walk you through the brand new FAFSA. Then they'll talk about financial aid offers. And heads up, they are looking, I think now they have 2 potential dates for FSAID, one for counselors and one for students and families. So take a look there. I think details are still kind of being fleshed out, but there's good information online for you. So just bookmark this page and keep connected with it. And then I'm going to let Michelle talk a little bit about our Kansas State scholarships, because again, this is not brand new information, but there's some good information out there for your students.
Yeah, so definitely encourage students to follow their FAFSA, but they should also, starting the new year, look into any other types of scholarships, right? So the state of Kansas does have scholarships. We, the Board of Regents, has scholarships for students and can administer those. So these have very specific requirements. All the information's on our website. Some of you probably already know about them, but I do want to highlight a few of them. Of course, the biggest one being the Promise Act Scholarship. This is a last dollar fund for students who are really interested in going into community colleges or tech colleges for really specific programs of study. So not everybody can get a Promise Act scholarship, unfortunately, but for these students, definitely push them to apply and to check with their institutions on getting some of that Promise funds. It does require the FAFSA, but it's a different type of need-based scholarship. It actually is based on income level. So it actually it allows a lot more students to get this free money than just say the Pell Grant through the FAFSA, right? So Promise Act funds, definitely have them apply if they want to do that. And then also the Kansas State Scholarship. If you have Kansas State scholars, definitely make sure that you've got everything in line and ready to go, so that if they want to go to a Kansas institution and they've made all the qualifications and done everything that they need to do, that we give them the money for that. And then of course our Ethnic Minorities Scholarship, and any type of HEROES scholarship waiver if we have any students who are dependents or spouses of any deceased or disabled military. So some really good funds there. This is free money. Some of them do require students to stay in Kansas when they're done with school and work in Kansas for a couple of years to have these types of scholarships, but definitely encourage your students to look into them and apply.
So great question. There was how do students send the FAFSA info to the Board of Regents for these scholarships?
Yeah.
I know their numbers for the schools, but what about the scholarships? So Michelle, do you want to address that?
Yeah, so we get information directly from the FAFSA as well. So students do not have to send us their FAFSA information. We can pull that. So don't have them send that information to us. We don't need it. We can pull it in different ways. So yeah.
And then too, several of the scholarships have just the state, there's one application, there's one scholarship application for, I think all of the scholarships on this page that required application, it's the same one. So a lot of times that will start that as well. And then and it says do many students receive the Kansas State Scholar Grant? I was under the impression the funding for this is low. I don't know. Do you know how to respond to that?
So being fairly new, I'm still learning everything as I go. The Kansas State Scholar Grant is, of course, very popular. A lot of students do qualify for that. I do know that the funding is low for that, but we do have ways of moving money around. So I think we're trying to fund that. In terms of how many, I don't know that answer. I'm so sorry. But we can definitely get that to you guys as soon as possible. It is competitive, but the students have to complete all those requirements for that state scholar grant through high school. So,
and there's a financial component to that scholarship as well, too, that I know.
And it is need-based.
It's not just, yes. Right. So it's the scholarship, the merit piece, and the need-based that goes together. So we've got one more thing, and we kind of showed you these links are all, again, I just put this in the chat again, are all in that Google Doc. They're also on our counseling resource, high school counselor resource page on the KBOR website. That's where we're going to house this presentation, the recording, the presentation slides, all of that is going to be there as well. And there's more than just these links, but just to point out a few, the NCAN Better FAFSA Training Toolkit is just for counselors about the new FAFSA. So there's really cool tools from different states, worksheets, things that you can do, interactive things you can do to learn, but also things that you can turn around and share with your students. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. The SHIO has a social press kit that you can utilize with your students. And then the federal student aid page. Like I said, that's the YouTube channel. You can also go just directly to federal student aid and look up counselor resources. I will tell you right now, there's not a lot of counselor resources for the FAFSA, the 24-25 FAFSA. All of the resources they have on federal student aid right now are for the current FAFSA, the old FAFSA. And so that I didn't really find that to be super helpful, but the YouTube channel has new videos and old videos on there. So I do think that is a useful tool. And then financial aid boot camp. Michelle, do you want to tell them a little bit about this one? This says it's the prototype preview, so maybe it just goes through the prototype of the.
It does. It just goes through what the whole new FAFSA actually looks like. So if you have some time, definitely look through that, because it will have, even though it is a prototype preview, it's pretty close to what it's actually going to be when you go through. But that financial aid boot camp, those are really just videos too, in terms of, what the FAFSA is going to look like, all the different aid programs, things like that. And this is one piece of it.
There's another question in the chat. I'm going to put a link. We have KBOR FAFSA resources webpage as well. And it does have information on how to host a FAFSA night. And we did a webinar several years ago about hosting your own FAFSA event as well. I would encourage you, yes, you can host one at your school all by yourself, but you can also team up. And since you can team up with an institution, you can team up at the library, you can team up with another high school. Like, I would encourage you to look at that as well, because again, we have almost 400 high schools in the state of Kansas, and we have 32 public institutions, some more private institutions. But if we want those experts to come, I think we get more bang for our buck by inviting those experts to come help us and teaming up in the community. So, and maybe your local community college or somewhere close would even host it for you at their campus. But again, do something, team up with something, but don't feel like you have to do it all by yourself either. Please don't feel like that. and there will be, we're looking at doing some, I think, FAFSA events hosted by institutions and advertising those through the K-State Extension Network too. Hopefully that will come this winter as well. So you've got some really great resources there. And with that being said, I think we're really at the end of our prepared presentation. We've still got 15 minutes at least. We are happy to take some questions. We've got our email information here for you, so you can send us questions directly as well. But with that, I will probably open it up to more questions for anyone who wants to stay. And for those of you who are like, great, I'm good, I don't have any questions, you get 15 minutes back in your day. And you won't hurt my feelings if you want to leave a little bit early. So please let us know what questions you have.
And before we open up to questions, I
Oh.
did put a feedback of the evaluation in the chat, and I'll put it again. We really appreciate your feedback and want to make sure that we're providing the information you need and the resources you need. So thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you, Tara and Michelle.
I might ask one more question
Yeah.
and before all the other counselors leave, because I'm the clueless new counselor. And when you have a parent night, you know, we were going to have the kids walk through and do their FSA ID before Christmas, and then the parent night in January. But do you go ahead and have the kids do their part before parent night? I just would like to know the timing and how people are planning this, if anyone out there wants to help me.
I would say, I think for now, you would want to just have them get on and do their FSA ID, because that's going to really start. There's not much they can do with the FAFSA yet, but they can get in and they can create their account. And really, we call it the FSA ID, but I think really for your students, it's just creating an account so that when that FAFSA opens, their students and the parents already have their account and they are ready to go. Yeah, we've got a counselor in the chat that said she did her FSA ID the same day they did Apply Kansas. So you can do the FSA ID anytime. It doesn't have to start with the FAFSA. So.
Tara, this is Stella in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And one of the things about the ID night that we had is parents asked a lot of questions concerning the fact that they had previous FAFSA ID. So it was really helpful to have that ID night before we start getting into the actual form.
Awesome. Thanks, Stella.
I have another question, and I know you guys touched on it a little bit, but like last year I had a senior who we had filled out the FAFSA, I'd helped her, and the dad, I mean, obviously at the time we didn't know, but the dad, it was a divorced family, just absolutely refused to help out in any way, give us his information, all of that. What if not knowing that they're going to be like that at the time that you're filling it out? Can you go back after maybe you've had a hard time and they're not willing? Can you go back and change in the FAFSA that now you're not going to provide information?
I believe so. I think there will be a way for students to go back in. I know that there's a way for students to go back in and make changes pretty seamlessly. What I am still a little bit concerned or two about that, that 45-day mark for contributors, we're not 100% sure what that's going to look like and what that means. So if a student does go in there and enters in the parents' information, I'm hopeful that there's a way for them to either take it off or answer yes to that question and talk to the administrator at the institution they're wanting to go to see if there's any way around that.
Okay.
Yeah. But if you're getting these questions now, it's always best to try to get that parent to go in there. If they filed taxes, it's just going to pull that information and they just have to list assets, and maybe that's something they don't want to share. Yeah, I've seen a lot of that. I used to do verification for a higher institute for KU, and we got a lot of pushback from parents and parents about that. So,
other questions?
I don't know if the recording will pull the chat, but I did answer that question about, do the students also have to provide their tax information? And that is correct. Yes, they
Okay.
do. So if a student files taxes in any way for, part-time job or anything like that, they do have to probably have those on hand just in case, but it will pull that information onto their FAFSA.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, with that, I think I'll probably stop our recording. I really hope that the resources at least point you in the right direction for more information as you need it, or at least to get ready for FSAID and for January when the game changes again. So thanks for hosting this, Melanie, and inviting us to participate with your counselors this afternoon.
Absolutely. You guys provided so much valuable information and so many resources, and we just appreciate you both. Thank you. And thank you, participants, for joining us as well. Stick around if you do have questions. Otherwise, our session is done, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.